Clearly, big brands are coming into Formula One and want a slice of the pie. At the same time, some of the biggest automotive names also seem to be warming up to the idea of being on the F1 grid. Yep, we're hinting at Porsche. In fact, it seems like Wolff still wants Porsche to enter F1 even after their talks with Red Bull are coming to an end. And here's why. First off, there are a lot of automotive brands entering the Formula One grid. There's no doubt that F1 practically surged in popularity over the last few seasons, and honestly, that growth has obviously been reflected financially with pretty huge sponsorship deals going through in the last few years. Now, even if some of them would have been put off by the idea in the past, it's starting to seem like a great investment for them now. Let's talk about Audi, who'll be joining in as an engine manufacturer in 2026. In fact, they've confirmed this at the Belgian Grand Prix, and many are expecting them to take over a team as well. At the same time, Porsche seems to be in-depth discussions of their own about working with Red Bull, but sadly, it seems like that's come to an end too, without any agreement. And even so, F1 is probably as attractive as it has ever been to the ones from Porsche and Audi, so that probably explains their interest. Plus, Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff seems to think that getting such big beasts, in terms of the automotive world, to join the sport can only be a good thing for them, and that's for them as well as anyone else who's already on the grid. What's more, Wolff seems to love the idea of Porsche entering Formula One. Now, Wolff says that every large corporation out there, especially auto companies, or even other companies for that matter, because Red Bull seems to be so great at that, they all got heavy investments. And they don't just use that to buy the racing team and pour down heaps of money into running it. In fact, they invest even more into activation, which is honestly pretty great for Formula One. Adding to that, he said, if a brand like Porsche that is known all over the world puts their marketing dollars into activating Formula One, we'll all be benefiting. Now, he's not wrong about it. Plus, he says that this, in itself, is the most important part, because it's not just about having a team and running it. Instead, in all markets, you've got to look out for big advertising, big campaigns, and just putting the brand out there. And that's exactly why having big brands in Formula One is so important for all the racing teams. So we're going to have to agree with Wolff here. And let's rewind a bit. It seems like he's already talked about how the sport is selective over which names are allowed to enter F1. He suggested that Andretti, who by the way has already shown an interest in F1, wouldn't really bring the required level of clout they need to add to the sport. And that's even after bearing the name of a former Formula One world champion. Clearly, there's a lot that goes on around here. Not to mention, Porsche and Red Bull talks are down the drain. That's right, guys. Porsche and Red Bull have been up to something for a pretty long time and hinted at a potential collaboration. And while that would have been exciting, they've ultimately decided to call it off without a deal. Now here's the thing. The Milton Keynes team just wanted Porsche to supply technical support and be involved because of the new engine regulations coming into F1 from 2026. But clearly, Porsche wanted more. It turns out that they wanted to buy into Red Bull technologies and have more say over the direction of the team in the future. And that's something Red Bull, who are pretty steadfast in their wish to remain independent, were simply not ready to take up. But don't lose hope, because Porsche has said that just because things didn't work out between them and Red Bull doesn't put an end to their interest in F1. They're still going to be monitoring the sport for potential opportunities, and with the right one, who knows? We just might see the famous German brand jump back into F1. Following up, here's what the future looks like for Porsche. Frankly, the signing of 2026 engine regulations introduces a cost cap, gives great environmental credentials, and is even a partial reset to give the company a greater chance of being competitive. And like we said, just because they're not entering F1 doesn't ban their entry from F1 entirely. And even though Porsche wants to come in as more than just an engine partner, they can find many other ways to do that. Think about Audi. When they were considering which race team they were going to write an enormous check for, right before Sauber came out on top, they took their time and evaluated a bunch of other teams. In fact, a takeover of McLaren came to nothing after a bunch of initial discussions right before the Four Rings started looking into Williams and Aston Martin. And right after its acquisition by investment group Doralton Capital in 2020, along with the surging popularity of F1 right now, the price of partnering with Williams is shooting the sky. At the same time, there's already substantial overlap with Porsche. So right now, Porsche supplying its all-electric powertrain to the Andretti customer team for Gen 3 in Formula E sort of creates an existing partnership that, in theory, could sort of pave the way for a union in F1 too. But if they want to arrive in time for 2026, talks really need to be swift. Porsche only has until 15 October to be named as an engine manufacturer by the FIA it wants to enter. Moving on to other related news. First off, Toto Wolff calls for penalty rules to be reconsidered after chaotic scenes. It seems like he believes the current Formula One engine penalty rules still need a little fixing after all the chaos at the Italian Grand Prix. In fact, 9 drivers received penalty points in Monza because they took new engine components to the vehicles. At the same time, time, what followed next was a farcical few hours after the qualifiers, and because of all the confusion over varying penalty types, no one involved in the race really knew which positions drivers would be starting the race. In fact, it took the FIA hours to publish the official starting grid, and it led to a debate over whether the current system needs revising. Up next, Toto Wolff takes a dig at Red Bull. Yeah, he isn't sparing them. Now, creating a significant part of their Red Bull power trainer division out of a former Mercedes staff, Wolff says his team also signs rivals' team personnel, but they don't really issue a press release every single time. Right after Honda's decision to withdraw from F1, Red Bull created the Red Bull Powertrain division and set about signing key personnel, and that list included a bunch of people like Ben Hodgkinson, head of mechanical engineering at the Brixworth factory, and Phil Prue, who was most recently the chief engineer in Mercedes' engine division, and that's just 2 out of 50 of the big names. Anyway, with Audi joining the circus in 2026 and set to team up with Alfa Romeo, Mercedes could probably face further staff exits. While Wolff says they haven't lost anyone to Audi yet, there will be situations where most of the Mercedes or ex-Mercedes staff will go to Audi, and there seems to be no doubt about that. If anything, it's an open market, so there's going to be movements between teams. And what could be a dig at Red Bull, Wolff took a dig at Red Bull with the issuing a press release comment we mentioned earlier. Finally, will Lewis Hamilton or George Russell end the 2022 win drought? As Mercedes continues to search for a win in the middle of a pretty difficult year, they've hardly got a few races left. Imagine 8 straight years of domination comes crashing to an end this season for Mercedes. That in itself is pretty remarkable, but what has been even more so is the team's failure to win a single race this season. Now, obviously, they're going to be working extra hard to win a race in the remaining 6 events, but even that doesn't seem very promising. Although the team now understands the troublesome W13 much better than they did earlier in the season, they're also aware of the car's limitations. And let's not forget, they were able to access some pretty respectable performances for the troublesome W13 at the right sort of tracks, specifically the ones which allow it to run with a low ride height. But as soon as ride heights need to be raised, the Mercedes seems to lose more of its downforce than the Ferrari, and especially the Red Bull. Adding to that, its rear suspension doesn't allow the setup options to accommodate the bigger rear ride heights they need to get it out of the bouncing zone comfortably. That's a wrap for this video. What's your take on Wolff wanting Porsche to enter F1 even though there aren't any chances of a partnership with Red Bull anymore? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.